Welcome to the minimum wage roundtable discussion. We appreciate everyone coming, waking up early. This is some really important stuff going on in our world. These guys have been working on these formulas for about 6 months now, and work with professionals all over the country, and we appreciate all the time. And Charles has been doing a great job with his webinars, and we appreciate all the work you've done. And now Nick Serra is throwing himself on the saber to be the first one to try out some of the commission formulas, so we can get some real good information on how that's working out right now. So once again, I'll turn it over to Charles.
Good morning, and for all of you that are visiting our great area here, welcome. This is what we call our slice of heaven, so it is great here in the Destin, Walton County area, so I'm a new resident here, so welcome. On to the matter at hand is this increase in minimum wage. The Florida Restaurant Lodging Association, they saw this coming and back in 2020, and we wanted to thanks to Dan, he wanted to create a roundtable, a group that looked at what other states, what other communities in the United States had done to manage this minimum wage increase, the mandated minimum wage increase. So we, in our small group that we had, which included Nick and John Horn and Jim was on the group as well. We talked to people in California, we talked to people in Washington that had already gone through these mandated increases in minimum wage. And we stumbled across a model that had been used successfully in Seattle. The man's name was Chad McKay, and he had a group of restaurants that he had used this thing called a commission model, using a service charge that you would charge your customers and a commission-based pay compensation that you would pay your tipped employees, your bartenders and your wait staff. And I think a lot of us on the committee were kind of skeptical of how that would work in the state of Florida, because we knew that if we went to a service charge, we'd have to lose the FICA tip credit. So we were, I think most of us, other than, I think Nick Serra may have been an early one on the saber on that. He was already in favor of going to that model. But as we studied it, as we had more conversations with people that had implemented that, especially this gentleman, Chad McKay, and after we started looking at the numbers on just how that would work, at least I really became convinced that that was a model for the future, to implement a commission-based pay for your wait staff and a service charge for your customers. The initial implementation of that may be at a zero cost benefit. However, as the minimum wage increases, and we know that it's going to go up to $15, $11.98 in 2026. So compare that number to what we started at in 2020 before the wages started to increase in January 21. So you know that increase is going to go up. So what this commission model does is really allow you to convert that group of employees to a truly variable cost based on the sales volume and the sales prices. So there's a lot of data gathering, there's a lot of number crunching to understand what the commission should be for your servers, your bartenders, what the bar override should be, because you know your bartenders are in kind of a different class than what your servers are as far as how to make sure that they're compensated fairly. And then what your service charge should be. So we've had people in this area that have already implemented this. I know Nick has done it. Nick's going to come up now and kind of go through the scenario that he's gone through. He's about 2 weeks into it. We've got Tyler Jarvis. Tyler may have been one that jumped out on this really early. I think you've been into it for about a month now. So it'll be really interesting, I think, to get these folks' feedback and let them tell you what they've experienced and allow you time to ask for questions as well. So, Tyler, you just come on up here because I think it'll be good to hear from you as well. So I want to turn it over to Nick, and he's going to go through what he's done, kind of his story, where he's at right now, what he's seeing feedback from the employees as well as the customers. I think that's really important because, you know, the numbers part of it is one thing, but how you present it, how you roll it out, how you sell it, how you get your employees on board is really probably the most important part of this, because your employees, the wait staff, the bartenders, they're the ones that have all of the face time with your customers, and you want to make sure that they understand it, they're compensated fairly as to what they were under the tip model, and they love it, and they're going to communicate that to the customers as well. So I think that's really the winning formula, is to have the right numbers, to have the right rollout that you convince your employees they understand it, they buy into it, and then they're going to sell it for you. So Nick, why don't you come up and kind of go through your story?
I started looking at this several years ago. My son lives in Seattle, so I had the opportunity to watch what happened in Seattle early on. We'd go out there a couple times a year, go out to dinner. So the reason I felt early on that this was something that could work for us is because I talked to servers. I saw how it worked out there, and I saw that the companies that messaged it correctly and went with a similar type model. In fact, one of Chad's restaurants, I had actually read about, not realizing it was Chad early on. And so that gave me a little bit of confidence that this is something that could work. Looking at the numbers, we realized early on that if we did nothing, it was 6 to 8% off our bottom line. That wasn't going to work long term. The first year, like Charles said, it's kind of a break even with the tip credit and everything. But as each year goes on, it makes a huge difference. So, two of the things that we looked at, first we said, we have to message this, we have to meet with our employees and get them on board. And we have to show them that they're not going to make less money. And we made the commitment to them early on that, and we modeled it out. We spent a couple hours at every restaurant with myself, Misty, and our team, showing them what they made, what they're making currently, and we have all that information through our posse. Everyone has that. We know what their tip percentages are and so forth. And we showed them what it would look like in the new model. But prior to doing that, though, we modeled our front of the house and the business and said, how do we get to at least a break even? We're not looking to make any money on this. We're just looking not to go backwards. And we shared that with our staff and said, we don't want to put this burden on you. We can't put it on us, and we can't pass it along to our customer. And we made them, we showed them how it would work if we raised prices, if we just raised prices to get out of this, what our menu prices would look like. And they realized that at some point we're not going to have the customers, and without the customers, they're not going to make the money. So that was a big part of it. I wanted to roll this out a little bit sooner. Misty over here to my right, who's our marketing director, and my voice of reason sometimes, really convinced me that we had to really work more on the messaging to our guests and how we got that message out. We hired a PR company to work with us as well to make sure the messaging was there. That was her biggest fear, was not that what we were trying to do wasn't going to work, but if we didn't message it correctly, we would have problems. And with that, I want Misty to speak to that a little bit. And also, she just met with our first restaurant yesterday, again, to get a kind of where we're at, what we're seeing on our bumps, on our additional tips, how the servers are feeling, and what kind of feedback. And she's been monitoring social media, as well as talking to the first 2 days. Misty and her team were at the restaurant talking to the guests as well and making sure that we rolled this out correctly. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Misty.
Great. So early on when we first started talking about this service charge commission model, someone said to me as the marketing director, well, this doesn't affect you, so why do you care? Which I was very taken back by that, because I knew how important the communication and the marketing of this was going to be. This is a big change. It's a culture change, it's a behavior change, and it's an industry change. So how we communicate that is going to be how it is received by both our employees and our guests. With starting out, we created a set of goals, 3 goals for how we communicate this service charge. And our first goal was to educate the guests of a service charge before they even receive service. Now, ideally, we would want to educate them before they actually get into the restaurant, but it's a whole new concept, right? So we want to make sure that at least are aware of a service charge before they receive service, and they are never blindsided by a service charge. The second goal we had was to communicate the service charge with a strategic and cohesive message. We wanted to make sure that we equipped our team with the right tools so they could talk about this with confidence and with the same message, so there was no misinformation out there. And this will also avoid any confusion or conflicts. And then the third goal we had, which is always our goal, is to provide such excellent service that ultimately the service charge is never an issue. I guess that's not really communication effort, but more operations. But that is extremely important, right? Is the safety net of 1 and 2. If the guest doesn't know the service charge and doesn't see the signage, doesn't hear the server talk about it, then at least if they had great service, they get the check, they see the service charge, you're like, you know what? I don't even care. I'm going to tip an extra 10%. I had such a great time here tonight. So that can ultimately, it was extremely important in our communication efforts. So with our PR agency, we created a set of key messaging pillars. And really, these served multiple purposes, but it was really important that we created a primary message, something that we could really build off of to create other messages for the website, for the menus, and then, of course, to give our employees to be able to communicate this. And I'll share with you, this is our primary message that we developed. And it's really served as a platform, as a simplified message to build on as needed in the other pillars. And our primary message, you can read it there. What it does is it states the obvious. It's very clear and transparent. They're paying for service as a compensation for our staff. The second thing it does, and this was important to us, is that it doesn't point blame. We didn't want this to be a war on hospitality, create any tension from a server to a guest. This is a win-win-win concept, and we wanted that to show in this. And really, we've got this philosophy now that we call it happy hospitality. A happy server leads to a happy service, which leads to happy guests. So this is all around a win-win-win concept, and no one's to blame for this. And third, this message, it really included the guest as a part of this movement, this evolution, we called it. And we thank them for being part of this movement, so they feel like that they're a big part of this win-win-win model.
And part of what we talk to our employees about, and we've been struggling as an industry attracting talent for the last several years. This year, with the last couple of years with COVID, it's just made it worse, but it's not like this hasn't been an ongoing issue of getting good people. And we feel that we need to change the attitude of our employees, of our managers, and of the guests of what a server is. They're a server professional. They are not, what other business, and I say this all the time, can you hire a plumber and say, come do the work, come fix, do whatever it is, and at the end, depending on how I feel, I'll determine if I'm going to pay you or not, right? It doesn't work in any other industry. And our servers have to start looking at themselves as professionals. We got to look at them as professionals, not as transient workers, or I guess you couldn't get anything else, so you're waiting tables. We've got to get away from that. We've got to start treating them as professionals, pay them as professionals. And when a guest says, well, if I can't control the tip, how do I know I'm going to get good service? I said, that's kind of insulting. What other business can you do that in, right? Their job is to provide service. If they don't do their job, either we're going to fire them or the guest is going to fire us, right? So, we have to change how we look at our servers and get them to look at themselves in a more positive way as professionals, and then they will act more professional and they'll deliver that higher level of service. So it really plays into an issue that we've been dealing with for a long time, and we've really stressed that to our employees in our meetings. And when we talk about it, you can see them light up, and they really said, wow, because we want to be treated as professionals. You sat in all those meetings. What was the feedback you got from it as we talked about that professionalism?
I think that was, it was encouragement, and it was motivation as well, to feel confident in their job and know that they're valuable, very valuable.
Yep.
So one last thing about our primary message I wanted to note was that we did develop, you see here, a logo that really created a visual of the idea. We wanted to make sure it was warm and happy, and that became a signifier for any time we talk about the service charge and any marketing efforts, we put this logo in there. And then one of the things that we talked about early on after some research and some roundtables we decided that it was going to be very important for the server to acknowledge the service charge with the guest right in the beginning. Let's just get it out there on the table. So with that, we really developed a kind of a server greeting platform for them. And we have it up here. And we encourage them to take this and morph it into their own. We want them to be confident and have their own tone when they're greeting a table. But we thought that was very important to come from the server because they're the ones developing the relationship with the guest and guiding them through their whole entire dining experience. So we wanted to come from them, not the host, not the manager, and of course not after they get the bill.
Very good, and I think that you really hit on some key points there with, again, the server is the focus. They're the ones delivering the message because they've got the FaceTime. So John and Tyler and anyone with guests, I'd like to kind of roll this around. I know that Tyler and I have talked, and I've worked with a few other restaurants that have gone through this analysis part, and there's some key numbers that are variables that are going to change when you're looking at determining your commission and your service charge. And it's really how your restaurant is set up, how you function with support staff, because your bussers, your bartenders, your hostess, your food runners, that's going to have an effect on what your calculations determine what your commission rate should be. You may have commission rates that should be 15, 16%, they could be 17%. So it all depends on how your restaurant operates, what the tipping percentage has been historically. Bartenders are typically a higher tip percentage than what your servers are. So you got to just dig down into the numbers. But the key is what they've talked about also. You want to make sure that your motivation is not to make money in year one. You're really preserving your downside risk in the future. You want to make sure your number one objective in year one, the message I heard here is we want to make sure that our people are paid what they would have been paid under the old model, and that we've set something up in place. We have a model now that respects the servers, the bartenders. We'll treat them as professionals, and we're going to create a culture. We're changing the culture from a tip model, and as Nick said, paying them after they deliver the service to you're going to be treated as a professional, and you've got something to attract more employees, more valuable employees in the future. So, Tyler, John, I don't want to skip over you.
You're fine.
I think people are interested to hear some stories on how it's gone, and share your experience, Tyler, how you did the analysis up front, what you came up with, and kind of the composition of your restaurants, servers, bartenders, and your support staff, and how that affected the numbers.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Charles. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so we rolled out our program on the first week of October due to just how our payroll fell. So we did a lot of numbers. Yes, sir.
Can I ask clarification? Can you just give us a little background on restaurant?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, guys. I'm Tyler Jarvis. I'm one of the owner and operators of Bald and the Beard Restaurant Group. We operate 3 concepts in the Destin area. One is East Pass Oyster House, which is down at Harbor Walk Village. Brotula's Seafood House and Steamer, which is at the Destin Fishing Fleet Marina on the Destin Harbor. And then Jack Kuta's Seafood and Sushi, which is just up the road right here, what we call Midtown Destin. So we have 3 completely different concepts, completely different price points, from a casual oyster bar to a little higher ticket price Seafood and Steamer House, and then Jack Kuta's being a sushi craft cocktail style restaurant. Totally different across the board, different price points, as well as different percentages on gratuities that we came across the findings from. So what we did is we took all of our numbers for each location, really tried to break it down and accomplish a couple things. 1, make sure the business was sustainable. 2, make sure our employees didn't make any less money. And then 3, find ways that we can incentivize the team to get on board, as well as continue to push sales and gain knowledge of their products so that they can become better at their job. We have a little bit of culture that we do, and it's basically similar to what Nick and them do over there, but it's a form of enlightened hospitality from Danny Meyer spinoff, but we just add the southern part into it because we're from down here. So we spend a lot of time on training and product knowledge so that we can equip our staff to be ready to best serve the clientele and the guests. So one of the things that we found is that our team was really adequate at the service that they were already providing, and because of that, their tip percentages were rather high. So when we originally looked at the 20%, I know we had been working with Nick. We were throwing around 13% commission. We were throwing 14, 15, et cetera. So where we ended up was a 15% for our restaurants, for our service staff, servers. And then we have our lead staff and senior staff, we actually take to 16% as an incentive to fall into a position of training and leadership, essentially, banquet captains, similar style position if you're in that type of dining. And then, so that's one position that we offer for them. We have our bar staff, because our restaurants aren't super bar focused as far as the sales that those revenue centers provide, they actually take home 17 to 18%, depending on the concept, of their actual sales. Because our bar staff was getting tipped out so much money from the servers in the old model, we actually had to take a percentage of our service charge and also implement that and pass it along to the bar staff. So this was a ways that we could make sure that they were compensated in a similar style and or more. So far our numbers they've been making more than they were per hour previously. Rolling it out in October, it's we rolled right in the middle of fall break, which was a pretty good sample of kind of what we would see in spring break summertime volume, and then now it's kind of slowed down a little bit to a traditional fall for our region here in Destin. So we're kind of getting to see from our first couple payrolls to the last one a pretty good range. And actually what we found is when the volumes were a little higher, they did see a lot more extra tipping. And when the volumes were a little lower, those numbers kind of fell more in line. So I think that has to do with some of your clientele and the customer base. But it does show that they have really, really large potential spring, summer to increase their hourly pay that they make. So that's kind of how we broke down our side of it. From our last couple, from our average of we've had 2 payrolls so far. We've been left over with about 2% of the service charge. And we plan on looking to see how we can best implement this and hopefully help add benefits and other things with the staff that we don't currently have for our hourly employees, just our management team. So there is some opportunity, I think, as this rolls on and we see how much money's left over with this and that. So right now we're waiting to see where the FICA will come in and take some of that away. But we were told by our accounting team that one benefit is you do lose FICA tip credit if you roll commission model, but any additional tip actually still rolls under FICA tip credit opportunities. So if you have a market or a region where you have guests that are a little more generous, that could be a benefit because you may not get your full FICA tip credit, Charles, that we're used to talking about, but you still have an opportunity to have some of that tip credit come back through extra tips. And to give you a little bit of an example, our teams at our restaurants are seeing anywhere from 6 to 8% extra tip on average. So, and that's percentage wise. So, a lot of our team, especially the ones we have now, are key employees that have been with us a while. So, they know the drill, they know the menus, they know the service styles. So it definitely shows at this time. So.
So what percentage of that 5 or 6% roll back to FICA tip credit did you guys get a baseline? If you're 2% over, let's say that 20% is the number, the delta's 18, so you have 2% add back to FICA tip. Was the FICA tip more than 2% of that? So are you at net zero? Are you at the high water before?
When we ran our estimation, it was under the 2%. It was, I want to say, and I'd have to go back and double check my numbers. I didn't bring it with me today, but I want to say it was like 1.2 of what we were estimating. Now that was prior to seeing what we had set for our extra tips because we put in a number of 0.3 or 3% is what thought we'd see an extra tip, and we're seeing double that currently. So that number is actually changing. It'll change a little bit because of that fluctuation.
Yeah, the FICA tip credit, you gotta take that into account, and if you tax affect that, the FICA tip credit is anywhere from 1.5% to 2% of a revenue number. So if you look at that delta between your commission, say it's 15, and your service charge of 20, 1.5% to 2% of that's going to be eaten up by the loss of the FICA tip credit. But Tyler's exactly right. So when you do the estimates, when you do your calculations to determine what you think you're going to end up, that's one of the factors, one of the variables that you need to consider is the additional bump that your servers and bartenders are going to get. And I think you were estimating a 3%, it's turning out to 6%. We've kind of erred on a more conservative and assumed a 2% both for servers and bartenders, with the hope that actual data will come in and will exceed that like he's done, and then you'll be able to adjust in the future. Maybe you need to tweak that model for incoming employees, and you've got some flexibility on what you pay those employees on a rate per hour when you start. You don't have to pay them anything. You can pay them a $0 per hour, which I believe is what Tyler did. The person we talked to that we worked with, Chad McKay out in Seattle, he started with what he called a freeze forward model, where he kept those people that were on board at that time. They continued to receive their minimum wage that they were getting, and then that allowed him to adjust future hires at a lower rate per hour, which is, I think, that's kind of when we're modeling. I'm a CPA, and we're working with some other clients that are doing this, and that's what we're looking at as a freeze forward. Basically, letting those tipped employees keep what they're making right now, but it's frozen at that rate, and then we can look at how the data comes in to adjust new hires that we may bring them in at a lower rate per hour. You also have the flexibility to adjust that percentage on a go-forward basis also.
So Charles, did you guys also take a price increase? Because cost of goods is up by about 2.5%.
Yeah, what that allows you to do, and we've talked to some other restaurateurs that they're not going to a commission based model to manage this minimum wage increase. So what you're forced to do is you're forced to do a menu increase. So I've talked to a lot of folks that's what they've done, and really we encourage people to do that. If you're not going to a commission-based model to combat or deal with this minimum wage increase, you're almost forced to have already gone through a menu increase, just because of the wage rate that we increased on October 31st. So
Yeah, to answer your question, we had already implemented our cost of goods increases through the season, because you just can't take on that kind of cost increase. Like for instance, at our steamer house, going from $10 a pound of snow crab to 20. So those correct. They were already in the implementation prior to the numbers. So yeah, we had already taken our cost of goods increase. What's interesting is that our servers, they're averaging anywhere from $25 to $50 an hour out of season, and they make their money obviously on volume, because now they're sales commission based employees. So you'll see as the season goes on, the dollar per hour, that the opportunity that they have is quite high. And I think that's, for us, we tried to do a couple things similar to Nick, is change the culture on how they're looked at and how this is a career for them. When I started out in this business, I was working in the city, and it's a lot different. You go to restaurants, servers are there 30, 40, 50 years, and it's a career, and it's looked at as an awesome career, and whether it's a family, generational, et cetera. And we've gotten away from that at some point, and it's nice to be able to offer some opportunity to get back to a similar style of career that they can feel consistent in how they make. There's not as much guessing when it comes to the money that they're going to make as they go to work now, where before it just depends on the guest.
yeah, that's exactly right. If you think about it, I'm a firm believer, like most of you here, in incentives matter. So what you've done with this commission model is you've really focused the incentive-based model. Now the incentives of the wait staff, they're aligned with your incentives. Your incentive is to have as much sales ring through those registers as possible. Well, that's now in line exactly with what your servers are too. So in the tip model, at least for bartenders, you are always, there's an inherent risk there that they're going to slide drinks across the bar to increase their tips, but not increase what's rung up on the register. Well, this at least solves that problem, right? I mean, you're not going to have desserts being given away. You're not going to have free drinks slide across the counter, those guys are more incentivized. They're going to ring it through the register so that they see it on their commission check. So I think we got a question over here.
Yeah, I guess this question is for Misty as well as John. What percent did you say you indicated people were paying more than the service charge? So if I'm charging 20% service charge, how many percentage of people paid higher and gave additional tip to the servers? Do you guys have that number?
So we're averaging about 5 to 10% in additional tips of overall net sales. And then of those people who do tip, they tip anywhere from 10 to 15% in additional tips.
So I don't think they have a percentage of how many people are doing it, but just the percentage. So they're getting overall an additional 5 to 10%. I think you said 8%.
Yeah, look, there's obviously a labor shortage. So I had to work some bar shifts actually about 2 weeks ago, and I had to work 2 of them back to back. I wish you would have come see me. But I averaged 24% tips.
Because you're a rock star.
Thanks, brother. It's the shake, man. So that's just an example of employees that are engaged in taking care of their guests. And I personally made it's part of our deal to make sure that they tell every guest about our service charge and this and that. And if they have questions, we answer the questions. But I personally let every single one of them know. And every single guest that I talked to was appreciative of it. So I think that's very important, like Misty said, is to inform properly. And out of those percentages, 4 out of the entire evening, including to-go orders, didn't tip extra. So I think it depends on, obviously, the concept, depends on, the engagement. But we're seeing anywhere from 6 to almost 9% of extra tip.
So what's your PPA in that particular restaurant?
That particular restaurant, we average right around 25 and a half, because that's a sushi bar. So we get a lot of, glass of wine and 2 rolls type situation, so.
And I think where we stand is we've been looking at this as well, because you can't raise your menu to cover these costs. I mean, you can get the $1.35 that it just went up, but you're not going to get when it gets to $15 an hour. So everybody is looking at different things. And if anyone, I talked to a restaurateur in Bradenton that increased the tip share, or the tip out from there, so to cover some of the wages. So there's all kinds of ideas floating out there. And that's why, we've been saying we don't want to be the first in our area, but we don't want to be the last in our area either. And so that's why it's so important for all of us to talk about this, to find out the ways that we all are coping with the labor cost and where we're going. And so one of the things that Nick hasn't shared yet, but he has had 0 TripAdvisor complaints. None of his guests have had a problem with this.
Thank
All
you.
right,
He's
I
knocked
maybe
on wood
corrected on
right
1
now.
or 2. Right, but so the people are accepting it. People have been saying, we need professionalism. We're getting professionalism, and I think that's the strongest thing we can all do without reading the antitrust statement with you. I think it's very important that we're all on the same sheet of paper, that we're all trying to do this together, because it is important. Absolutely.
We don't charge.
And you don't have to.
We don't charge any commission on to-go.
Right.
Because we're saying this is for service. You're paying for service. To-go doesn't offer that. Now, we may down the road look at a 5% packaging fee or something, but right now, we started out with, to-go's, there's no commission.
We do.
Our business
And
model
they-
changed so fast, 25% for takeout and delivery, that as we try to get people to go back
Right.
to dining, you do the calculations, you gotta assume that your percentage right now for your sales is a lot of it is to go. So
When I say to-go, if it's to-go, if they're getting it from the server, that's different. But if they're just ordering a straight to-go order, right now, we're not. But we probably will roll into a packaging fee or a cost associated with to-go orders.
So we actually do, at Jack Akuta's, because of the sushi and the concept, we do quite a bit of takeout.
Right.
And we have the 20% charge. It's just flat across, whether it's takeout or not. And the key is just informing them. And we have our guests, they tell them on the phone, the bar staff, et cetera. But if you have to inform them, and, they're going to make the decision. It's kind of like the order DoorDash. They're going to charge you 40% or 35% or whatever it is. It's on there. It tells you, like, hey, you're going to pay an extra fee. So far, we've only had 1 major complaint with that, and it was because they didn't get informed. So it's really all about the communication between the guest and the employee or team member, depending on who's taking the information. It's online as well. If you have like an online system where they can order everything and pay up front, it has that information. So I think it's 100% about how you communicate that to the guest. But people are used to paying the fees, used to paying extra for delivery and takeout and things like that already because of what's happened. So, check your concept and see what works best. But for us, it was about consistency. So we didn't want to have multiple ways to do it, just to keep things consistent on our half.
You didn't mention anything, unless I missed it, about what goes to the back of the house or what goes to the non-tippable people, or maybe even FICA credit card charges or stuff like that. Is there a breakdown that you guys think is fair when you have that, or do you at all use any of that to the back of the house? Because I think they're the ones that really.
Yeah, so what you've got is, you've got the delta between the commissions that you pay your servers and bartenders and the service charge. So let's just, for easy math, 15 commission, 20% service charge. You don't charge the servers or the bartenders any of the credit card charge if any of the fees related to that. So they don't pay any of that. So that's if you were doing that in the past, that's an additional cost that you've got to incur as an employer. The employer is also going to now they're going to lose some of the FICA tip credit, so that's going to eat up part of that delta. And you're also going to have, if you have a restaurant where you've got bussers, bar backs, food runners, then there was a tip out that was occurring before. So let's assume the tips that those servers and bartenders were receiving were 20%. Typically, they were probably paying out 4 to 5% as a tip out. So they were netting 14, 15%. Is probably in the sweet spot of what was happening. So those folks, those support staff, they're not going to receive any of the commission. So they're not going to get the benefit of a tip out in the future under a commission model. So an additional cost that the employer is going to have is now, if they want to keep those bussers and bartenders, it's feasible. Those guys were making $20 an hour after tip out. So you're going to need to increase your cost that you pay to those support staff. One of the other culture shifts that Nick or Tyler didn't touch on is there's also a culture shift related to that position. That position now, they don't work for the servers and bartenders. They now work for Tyler and Nick. They're now fully compensated by the owner of the business. So there's a mind shift in that as well. And that position now becomes totally in the control of the owner.
Yeah, and to add to that, we've kind of tried to portray that position as an entry-level position that has the opportunity to improve and move up, which is typically what happens. You have servers or bussers, runners, et cetera, they move up to servers. But we've really put a heavy emphasis on that. Said if you want to go from a set hourly rate to an opportunity position, then we'll go through the training process and things like that. So we've also kind of staged it as that on our side.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're going to end up paying those employees, depending on how much they make now, $16 to $20 an hour.
Yeah, that's exactly
All right, one more question on relating to the cost involved. This comes from a saloon keeping point of view. It may not work as well as a restaurant. Have there been thought, because we've got probably half a dozen or so bartenders are going to be close to six figures this year because they've had such unbelievable. We don't require a whole lot of them. The question that we've had posed is maybe they should be responsible for more things to cut down the labor in other areas. I knew one restaurateur / bartender or saloon keeper that didn't have any cleanup staff. All he had was waitresses. The entire cleanup of the whole place was done by the waitresses. I'm talking about the men's urinals, the floors, everything, the drapes. They did everything before they left. It may take them an extra 2 hours, but they made good tips during the course of the evening. The bartenders themselves, in places that I'm familiar with, Rosie O'Grady's, and maybe require a deposit sheet along with their bank. Bank is made up completely like it was given to them. A deposit sheet that would be ready to go to the bank. So the night auditor would theoretically take all the deposit sheets from each one of the shifts, staple them together, and total those up, and there's your deposit. Requires a lot more work on the part of the bartenders, as well as additional things as far as setting up the bar, cleaning the room, getting the tables clean, all the rest of the things that maybe you require a cleanup staff to do at night or something. And that's an option we were thinking about for those high tippable people. In the restaurant area, maybe a little bit harder to do, but from the bartender's point of view in a saloon, not very hard.
The problem you're gonna have is the Department of Labor, that's one of their big concerns currently, and with their new 80-20-30 rule, they're saying that you can only be working in a tipped fee for 30 minutes at a tipped wage. So if you've got people staying an hour after the guests have left, you cannot. You have to pay a minimum wage to do that. So the Department of Labor, and I would assume many attorneys will be looking into that in the very, very near future. And they're just trying to crack down on that. And it's ludicrous that, you can't bring someone in an hour before you open to get set up and ready.
Yeah, anyone else out there, have you started the evaluation process for the commission model by show of hands?
I have.
Drew?
One of the questions I was going to ask, I think, Tyler, you said you were at zero on the base pay for the servers at this point. And I know we were at $1 or something that Chad had done in Seattle. The delta that you're talking about, that variable between what you're actually paying them in commission and what you're receiving as a service charge, isn't that getting eaten up if you don't make that change?
Yeah,
Because
that's part of
I'm
the-
hearing you say that some people aren't making that change, but if you do make that change and you drop that, you're going to eat up more than if they're getting 15% now after a tip out, so to speak, you're going to have to make that up and pay them 18.
Yeah,
It
it's-
seems
you
in
gotta-
order to compensate for this reduction in their base $6.98 an hour.
Right, you got to do the math on that. So if you're paying them, a minimum wage, let's say you're paying them $5 per hour instead of the $6.98, then all that goes into the calculation of measuring what they would have gotten paid under the tip model versus what they're going to get paid under the commission model. And all of that is offset the employer cost. You're looking at, okay, what are we bringing in as a service charge? That offsets the total employer cost that we're going to incur, which includes the commission as well as the rate per hour. So it does affect your workers' comp as well. And sales tax is applicable to the service charge. So we get that question a lot too.
And one of the things Nick brought up is some people are under percentage rents. So does this go into that calculation? General liability is based on sales. So you've got to negotiate some of those things beforehand.
Right.
Maybe comment on a couple of those things. When we did our modeling, we also figured in a 3% bump, that they get 3% additional. So we figured that was part of our calculation. Now, they're getting more than that, and we figured they would. But that takes care of a lot of that wage issue, right? And we said, if you make more, great. We want you to have the opportunity to make more. If you make less, we're going to look at this after 3 to 6 months. And if we find that you're not making what you used to, then we will adjust our model to make sure you don't go backwards. And so that put them at ease a little bit there. When we did the modeling for the restaurants, at first we did a modeling for our servers to show them they're going to not go backwards. Then we modeled it for the restaurant. The first thing was to back into what does that percentage have to be? Is it 14, 15, 16%? That once you had that, we could then model the restaurant, take into account FICA tip, workers' comp, everything like that. So you plug all that in. We also plugged in a $2 to $3 increase for our cooks into our calculation, and we came up with about a break even across the board. Now, the model works in all of our restaurants, but some restaurants it's going to be a zero base. Some of our slower restaurants, like the one we're starting at the Boathouse, which is one of our lower volume local restaurants, we're starting at a $5 base plus a 16% commission because we have very little support staff there. They do a lot of the work themselves. So those numbers can change based on the restaurant. But if you model it for both the restaurant and the employee side, you'll know if it works or not and what those numbers need to be.
Nick, will you introduce yourself? Some folks may not know.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Well, I'm Nick Sarah with Saltwater Restaurants. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. We have 9 restaurants here in the Destin market. We have Surf Hut and the Crab Trap here on Old 98 on the beach. Those are 2 of our higher volume seafood restaurants. We'll do 1,500 to 2,000 customers a day at those restaurants and range from $27 to a $40 check. Right now, Crab Trap Destin's running $40, $42 on our PPA because the price of crab's gotten so high. We also run.
I know we're running out of time too, but I want to make sure the audience here can talk to Nick. Tyler's going to be around, and we can continue this conversation outside.
Yeah, absolutely. We are running out of time, so I know that there's another session that starts at probably 9:30. So we'll be around today, and I don't know if we have our contact information or not, but we can take a couple of more questions.
We haven't talked about, these are all 7I exemptions, so we haven't talked about, you have to ensure that your server makes basically minimum wage.
50, you gotta make sure, with the commission model, they make time and a half.
Time
So
and a half.
right now, it's 15, we're guaranteeing them $15 an hour over the course of the, if it's a 2-week payroll, over that 2 weeks. It's not hour per hour. And if they make less than 15, we have to bring them up to 15, just like you did, and that's how we get away, that's how you get, I say away with, but how you don't have to pay time and a half, because you're guaranteeing that they'll never make less than that.
Correct. And then there's something with the overtime, you don't have to pay the overtime wages, because as long as you
There is no
ensure,
overtime with the
you ensure
commission,
that,
Because
you're
you're
fine.
guaranteeing that they'll always make overtime. As the minimum wage goes up, that number's gonna go up. So right now it's 15, when it goes to, to 11, then it'd be time and a half on 11, time and a half on 12, and so forth. But what we also told our staff was that this makes management pay more attention to how many servers we're putting on the floor. In the old days, you'd put 5 servers on, you really knew you only needed 3, but you brought 2 extra in case someone didn't show up, maybe send someone home. Now, and the servers always hated that, right? So I was saying, we have to pay more attention to what we're doing as managers to make sure that we're not overstaffing, and that's good for you, the server, and it's good for us, the restaurateurs, because we're not gonna have people there that we don't need.
Two questions. One is, I think you got to audit your numbers every 6 weeks, I believe it is, or something like that, from a payroll perspective, or something.
You're talking about for the 7I exemption?
Yeah, for the
No,
7I,
you can, when you do the 7I exemption is a federal exemption that allows you to work employees without paying them additional overtime, but you have to meet certain requirements, and basically you're still meeting the 1.5 times the $15 per hour. When you do that, when you elect that 7I exemption, you also elect a measurement period. You can do a month, you can do a year. What we're recommending is people officially elect a year, however, monitor it on a pay period basis. So you don't, if you've got an official 1-year measurement period, you don't want to wait a year and then measure to determine if you were in compliance with the overtime laws, right? So you want to measure that throughout the year, but your official measurement period is annual.
And on the 7I, there's 3 main things. They've got to make at least 50% of their wages in commission. They have to they have to sell something. They got to be a salesperson. So you couldn't put a cook as a 7I exempt employee. What's the third one?
Well, those are, you've got a criteria to be able to be a commission-based employee, and then you have a set of standards for the 7I exemption. The 7I exemption, basically, if you think of your overtime requirements right now, if you work overtime in a pay period, then you have to pay time and a half for that. Then the 7I exemption basically loosely is the same deal, as long as they're paid that 1.5 times during the period of time they work overtime.
Do you have to show like the tip credit trails, you have to prove that they make that 1.5?
That's part of your measure, when you do the measurement process, yeah. Yeah, so we got a question in the back?
As you're trying to become the employer of choice, is this too confusing to new employees coming in? Being the early adopter, like, hey, this is this place, it's doing this.
I think that these guys will have to answer that. I think one of the objectives as somebody that's consulting restaurant owners is what you're creating is an environment where you will attract employees. So yes, you will become an employer of choice, that people want to go there because of the culture you've created and the compensation that they can be paid. So it's is that what they're finding? These guys they're a month into it, so I think that's their hope and their dream that they will be. Time will tell.
Like on our first, we just started 2 weeks ago, we've hired 2 new servers because of the commission model. They came over through word of mouth through our other employees, and we've actually hired 2 new people strictly because we went to this model.
So the early indication is that people hear about that, and I think in this industry, I think word spreads pretty quickly. So Tyler, have you had any
Yeah,
experience with that?
the hiring manager has to just be able to convey that message very clearly and explain the numbers. And so far, of the 5 we've hired in the past month, we've had no issues so far.
We got a question in the middle.
Yes, I have a comment and a question. Myself and my director of sales and marketing were in Atlanta about a month ago, I think it was, and we went to a restaurant. We had multiple restaurants and multiple hotels in Panama City Beach. And so we went there, we sat down, we were waiting on our drinks, and there was something on the table that gave us like the names of the restaurant. And one of them was an 18% service charge across the board, which we didn't know when we sat down. So I'd like to commend you on the servers speaking that before it happens, because we were sort of taken back by wow, that, you're sitting at the table, you've already ordered, you see this. The second part of that is our owner is a partner in multiple CPA firms, so we're kind of going back and forth on what we're going to do. I really wanted to ask the hiccups that you initially, because I want to go back to the customer. The customer retention on this. Are you seeing, I know your numbers, what percentages of the increase of tip or commission or whatever over and above, but what are you seeing as far as the guest reactions? This plant is really irritating. What are you seeing, customer reaction, feedback? I know you said you didn't get anything negative from TripAdvisor. How long have you been doing this? What has really been the hiccups going into that? Was it with the employees themselves, or was it with the guests? I am a big proponent of my servers and bartenders and bussers all feeling like this is a career path for them. We're all about a journey for them, so I really want to do the right thing when it comes to them, but I also want to do the right thing when it comes to guests and also that guest retention, customer retention.
Yeah, so real quick, just from the 2 weeks we've launched, so it's not solid stats here, but I've sat incognito at the restaurant just to hear feedback. And when the server mentions the service charge, the reaction is normally, okay, and then it's business as usual. If there's a conversation, it's usually something along the lines of, oh, we thought something would be, change would be coming. We know, and then it starts a conversation about, inflation, employment issues. So then it's kind of like, okay, business as usual after that. So really that's been the common response, is just, thanks for letting us know, and we're back to business as usual.
Yeah, I think also to note, a lot of the questions we got in the first 4 weeks from the guest was, why doesn't my server get the full 20%? And a lot of it is guests don't understand that the server never gets the full tip in most formats because there's a tip out.
Right.
So
Is your server discussing that part? They don't get this?
they just break down the percentages if somebody really asks or they grab a management member. But I've had to go to tables and explain to them the percentage that they earn and how percentage of that goes to the bar staff for their work, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of it is that's the question that they get. And then the next question typically after they explain it is, oh, if can I leave extra? And if I do, does that get split? And I mean, we have all that in information pieces, but a lot of it is just guest interaction at the time. So making sure the staff understands that point is extremely crucial.
Yeah, we are.
Can I thank the panel?
Absolutely.
I really want to thank Nick Sarah for kind of taking the lead on this. Absolutely. The background he's done, the information he shared with us. Round of applause for this panel.